I used to think love was a quiet thing, a warm coffee mug in the morning, a goodbye kiss at the door, a soft light left on when I worked late, but routine is where betrayal hides best. Every morning, she kissed me like we were forever, like her lips still knew the vows we whispered under an autumn sky, and I believed her. I believed every brush of her fingertips, every laugh, every I love you she threw over her shoulder. I never thought to question why she never stayed long enough to watch the sunrise with me, or why she always had night meetings that never showed up on any calendar. Until I found out. It wasn't the hotel keycard or the unfamiliar cologne on her jacket that broke me, it was the security footage. Her kissing him at midnight, in the same parking lot where she once kissed me under the stars. Morning kisses for me, night kisses for him, and a heart she never really handed to either of us. But here's the thing about heartbreak, if it doesn't kill you, it carves you into someone sharper. She kissed me goodbye like it was a favor. Now I'm going to make her watch how I say goodbye for real. They say the soul feels things the mind refuses to acknowledge, and maybe that's why, even before the truth unfolded, I had already begun to mourn something I couldn't name. She always left before the city woke up, slipping through the gray stillness of dawn like a whispered promise. She said her thoughts were clearest in the early morning, when the world was too sleepy to interfere. I never questioned it. I was proud of her, this driven, luminous woman who painted with emotions and walked like her feet barely touched the ground. Each morning, I made her breakfast. 2 eggs, scrambled softly the way she liked them. Toast with apricot jam, a fresh cup of coffee, extra cream, no sugar. I placed them on the table like offerings to a goddess I didn't want to lose. And before she left, I always tucked a note into her bag, sometimes a quote, sometimes a joke, sometimes just a line that read, "I'm still yours." She never replied to the notes, but she always kissed me. Those kisses were short, breathless things, familiar, dutiful, like someone checking a box. At first, I found comfort in their routine. I clung to them, like people cling to the idea of normal when the earthquake has already cracked the foundation beneath their feet. But then I noticed her coffee, always half full, still warm when I cleared the table. She never drank it, never thanked me. It sat untouched beside her phone, buzzing quietly with messages she never opened in front of me. I told myself it was work, it had to be work. I told myself that a woman who let me trace constellations on her back during thunderstorms wouldn't have room in her heart for deception. That the same lips whispering my name in the dark couldn't possibly form another man's name in the light. But the truth isn't loud, it never shouts, it leaks. Through silences, through glances, through patterns we don't want to admit are changing. Not holding hands, not touching. But she didn't have to. Her eyes did the reaching. Her smile did the betrayal. He was taller than me, sharper, dressed in the kind of expensive nonchalance that reeked of validation. His hand brushed her lower back like he owned the rights to her story. She didn't flinch, she leaned into it, into him. And then it happened. She kissed him. Not like how she kissed me, not the shallow habitual press of lips. This one lingered, it curled, it meant something. I watched from across the street, behind the windshield, behind 1,000 shattered illusions, and I didn't move, I didn't breathe, I didn't rage, I didn't scream, I just disappeared. Because in that moment, it wasn't just her lips that betrayed me, it was every morning I ever trusted. Every goodbye I thought was temporary. Every little note I slipped into her purse like a prayer she never bothered to answer. I wanted to cry, but there was nothing left to cry with. Grief isn't loud, it doesn't wail in the streets. Sometimes, it just sits with you. In your car. Under a flickering light. While the woman you loved walks into a hotel that doesn't belong in your story. She kissed me that morning. She kissed him that night. And in between those two gestures, she buried the man I used to be. We met in the rain, of course, stories like ours always begin in the rain. It was late October, the kind of cold that seeps through your sleeves and buries itself under your skin. The sky had cracked open like a confession, and the streets shivered beneath a sheet of silver. I stood outside the record store, with my umbrella tilted just enough to shield my shoulder bag. And that's when I saw her. She wore red. Not the soft kind, not burgundy or rust, red like defiance, red like a promise, red like she was daring the gray world to touch her. She didn't have an umbrella, she didn't seem to care. Her hair was soaked, plastered to her face in places, her arms hugging a stack of sketchbooks like they were her armor. She looked like a painting, something unfinished, raw, and aching for color. I didn't think. I stepped forward and offered her my umbrella. She looked up. Her eyes were not blue or green or brown in any remarkable way, but something in them, the way they didn't flinch from the rain or from me, made me feel like I'd just walked into a different story entirely. "Thank you," she said, brushing a strand of wet hair behind her ear. I offered to walk her to the next block, and she said yes like it was inevitable. That day didn't feel like coincidence, it felt like choreography. We talked about nothing and everything. She said she was an artist, I said I wrote music, she smiled. So, we both chase silence and try to fill it with something beautiful. That line stayed with me, it still does. I gave her my umbrella that day, she gave me her number written on the back of a cafe receipt. The ink was slightly smudged from the rain, but I didn't care. I pressed it into my wallet like a keepsake from a life I hadn't started living yet. We saw each other the next day, then the day after that, then again, and again, until her laugh became the punctuation to my days. She made coffee feel like a ceremony. She painted in my apartment, sprawled out on the floor while I played piano. We didn't need conversation, just the nearness of each other, the safety in shared space. I remember one afternoon, she stood in front of a blank canvas for hours, didn't paint, didn't sketch, just stared. When I finally asked what she was thinking, she whispered, "If I get this wrong, it won't be us anymore." I didn't understand then. I thought she meant the art. Now I know better. I gave her everything. My mornings, my playlists, my quiet. I played her songs I never played for anyone else, songs without lyrics, songs I hadn't even finished yet. I let her name them. I let her name me. And she filled me with light. She brought sunlight into my apartment and left petals of herself in every corner. A hair clip on my desk, a scarf on the doorknob, lipstick on my coffee mugs. She once painted my name in gold across the edge of her canvas, said it was just a test, but she never painted over it. Even when the rest of the canvas changed a dozen times. We never said "I love you" early. We didn't have to. We said it in other ways. In how I watched her sleep like she held the weight of galaxies in her ribs, in how she traced the veins on my forearm like sheet music she was trying to memorize. I thought what we had was fate. I thought meeting in the rain was the universe opening its arms and telling us, this is the one. But fate doesn't come with instructions, and sometimes, fate is just a well-dressed accident. Looking back, I see it. The cracks weren't loud, they whispered. She stopped naming my songs. She painted with the door closed. She laughed less when I played. She kissed me, but not like she used to. Still, I clung to the beginning. To red dresses and rainy days, to coffee receipts and umbrella confessions. Because beginnings have a way of blinding you, of convincing you that the ending couldn't possibly happen to you. But it does, it did, and now when I hear rain, I don't think of fate anymore. I think of how wet her hair was that day, how I thought I was saving her from the storm, when really, I was handing her the umbrella she'd later leave behind. It started in the quiet places, not in the arguments, because we didn't argue, not in the tears, because none had been shed yet. It started in the laughter, hers, specifically. The kind of laughter that used to shake her whole body, the kind that once lit up the corners of our apartment and spilled into the hallway like sunlight that couldn't be contained. I lived for that sound. But then it changed. It came late at night, muffled under a blanket, behind the screen of her phone. Soft and distracted, like someone trying not to wake the person lying beside her, like someone who shouldn't be laughing at all. I heard it from the kitchen one night, her curled on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. A giggle escaped, light and strange. I peeked around the corner. She didn't notice me, or maybe she did, and just kept typing anyway. I asked who it was. She said it was just a friend, no name, no smile in her answer, just a quick shrug and a tighter grip on her phone. Her laugh disappeared the moment I asked. That was the first time I noticed the way she started guarding things she used to share freely. We'd always had a silent language, glances, half words, gestures. I could tell her mood by how she stirred her coffee, whether she was at peace or distracted by the brush of her fingers on the rim of the cup. Now, even her silences had gone cold. So I tried to warm us back up, the way I used to. One evening, I stopped by the flower stall near the train station. She used to love their lilies, white, delicate, soft as breath. I remembered how she once held a bundle to her chest and said they reminded her of snowfall that didn't hurt. That night, I came home with a full bouquet. I didn't say anything dramatic, didn't prepare a speech. I just walked in quietly and placed them in her hands while she stood in the kitchen scrolling through her phone again. She looked surprised. Not touched, not moved, just surprised. Then she smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It stopped at her lips, didn't touch her eyes, her mouth curled out of obligation. Gratitude painted over with something else I couldn't name yet. "Thank you," she said. She kissed my cheek, and then she stepped away. "I just have to take a call." I nodded. Of course. Another call. Another silence I wasn't allowed into. She disappeared into the bedroom, phone clutched like a secret. The door clicked shut behind her, quiet but heavy. I stood in the hallway, holding onto the scent of lilies like it could explain anything. But the phone never rang, not once. I stood there for 7 full minutes, counted them by the ticking of the clock above our kitchen sink. There was no voice, no sound, no laughter. Only silence. And silence. Silence always knows more than words do. I leaned my head gently against the door, not enough to intrude, just enough to listen. I imagined her sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at the screen, maybe waiting, maybe regretting, maybe not. Eventually, I walked away. I poured myself a glass of water I didn't want. I stared out the window at a streetlight flickering like a heartbeat about to give out. I heard the door open behind me and her bare feet padding toward the living room, where she picked up the flowers and moved them to the kitchen table without saying anything. I wanted to ask her who the call was for, why it never came, why she looked more alone in the room with me than when she was by herself, but I didn't. Because sometimes love makes you afraid of the answers. We sat together on the couch that night, side by side, shoulders brushing. But it felt like we were two strangers who had wandered into the same frame by accident. She scrolled. I stared at the lilies. They drooped slightly, as if even they could feel the absence of meaning. I thought about how easily things slip, how you don't hear the fracture until the glass finally shatters. And that night, I heard the first crack. There was one morning I'll never forget, not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. She stood in the hallway, coat draped over her arm, fingers brushing the handle of her purse, like she was in a rush to leave a place she no longer felt at home in. The sky outside was the color of old bruises, grayish purple, bruised with clouds, the kind of morning that promises rain but never delivers. She turned to me, just like always, but her smile didn't come. Her lips found mine, but they felt cold, dry, unmoving, like she had forgotten what we used to be made of. And I knew, right then, something had shifted, not snapped, not cracked, slipped. There was no rhythm in her goodbye, no laughter under her breath, just the faintest press of her mouth against mine, like she was doing it for memory's sake, a habit, a muscle memory her heart no longer choreographed. She didn't look back when she stepped out the door, she used to. Every morning, just a glance over her shoulder, like she was checking if I was still standing there, still watching, still hers. But not that day. That day, she just left. And I stood in the doorway, still tasting her silence on my lips. That was when I noticed her perfume. It had changed, sharper, stronger. Not the soft floral scent I used to bury my face in when she hugged me from behind. This one clung to her like armor, like she was hiding something beneath the layers of synthetic sweetness, something raw, something she didn't want me to smell. People think scent is subtle, but perfume is truth wrapped in design. And that morning, she reeked of distance. I started to trace it backward. I thought about the nights she came home late, how the scent never matched her story, how she used to smell like paint and rainwater and lilacs, but now smelled like hotel soap and someone else's shadow. I thought about how she began turning her face to the last second, how our kisses landed more on her cheek than her lips, how her embrace became a lean, not a pull, how I kissed her like a man trying to anchor a ghost to his chest. And still, she drifted. She'd stopped wearing her paint-stained hoodie around the house, the one I loved, the one with flecks of blue and green from the mural she painted on our first anniversary. Said she wanted to feel put together. Said she was reinventing her routine. But love doesn't need reinvention, it needs presence, and hers was already halfway out the door. There was a photo taped to the fridge, one we'd taken at the coast, 2 summers ago. We were tangled in each other's arms, wind in our hair, salt on our skin. She was laughing mid-frame, eyes closed, cheeks pink. I stared at it for a long time that morning. Wondered when the version of her in that photo disappeared. Wondered if I had driven her away. Or if she had already been walking when I was still trying to build a home. Later that evening, I watched her fold laundry in silence. She didn't hum, she always used to. I handed her a fresh cup of coffee, hoping the ritual would ground us again. She took it without looking, sipped once, and set it down on the table like it didn't matter. She didn't notice she'd left her lipstick stain on the rim. I did. And for the first time, it felt like graffiti. Not a love mark, not a signature, just residue. The next morning, I kissed her first. I wanted to reclaim something. But she flinched, not visibly, not dramatically. Just a flicker of breath caught in her throat, her eyelids stilled, and then she smiled, but too quickly, like someone reacting to a line they've rehearsed too many times. She said she'd be late that night. Another showing, new gallery, last minute. Her voice had the right tone, but her eyes didn't blink fast enough. Her fingers fidgeted too long with the strap of her bag. I nodded. Of course. Of course I believed her. What else do people in love do? But lie to themselves for just a little longer? As she stepped out again, the scent of her perfume lingered in the air, citrus and something heavy underneath. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by invisible threads of her new world, wondering if any of it still had space for me. The truth wasn't loud, it came in whispers, cold lips, avoided eyes, stronger perfume, the things she didn't say, and the kiss that meant nothing. It was raining again, not the romantic kind this time. Just cold, messy rain that made everything feel like it was melting. Her coat dripped as she entered the apartment, shaking her umbrella like she was trying to rinse off the day. She moved past me with the tired grace of someone used to slipping through shadows. "Long day," she muttered, pulling off her coat and tossing it on the armchair. It landed wrong, too fast, too careless. And something slid out. A click. A soft thud. Plastic on hardwood. I bent down before she noticed. It was a keycard. Blue, branded. Hotel name printed across the top in glossy gold. But not ours. Not the place we used to visit on anniversaries. Not the one with the rooftop view and the chocolate-covered strawberries she once said made her feel spoiled in the right way. This was somewhere else, a place I didn't know, a place I had never been invited to. I held it in my hand for longer than I should have, felt the weight of it, the smoothness, the cold, undeniable truth of it. She didn't even glance over. Instead, she walked into the bedroom, calling out something about needing a hot shower. Steam rose from behind the bathroom door, but I stayed in the hallway, staring at the key. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the card resting between my fingers. I turned it over and over, like maybe if I stared long enough, it would confess, like maybe it would whisper her secrets to me. But it didn't. It just sat there, silent, like her. By morning, I had memorized the hotel name. By noon, I had searched the address. By evening, I was driving there. I told myself I just wanted clarity, not revenge, not confrontation, just the truth, even if it cut. The hotel was tucked off a quiet street, the kind of place built for discretion. No valet, no doorman, just dim lighting, tinted glass, and a name that sounded more legitimate, like a brand of perfume than a place to sleep. I waited in the car, rain tapped the windshield like nervous fingers, minutes felt like hours felt like a dare, then she stepped out. Her coat was different, black, belted, elegant. Her hair was up in a way she hadn't styled it in months. She looked untouched, unbothered, like she'd shed the version of herself I knew and slipped into a new skin, one designed to impress someone else, and he was beside her, taller than me, confident in that careless, money-slick way. His hand rested on her lower back like it belonged there, like it always had. She laughed. God, she laughed, not nervously, not politely, but fully, shoulders shaking, head tilted back, joy spilling from her mouth like she had never known sorrow. That laugh used to be mine, now it danced in a hotel parking lot like I was the stranger. I didn't move, just watched. Watched as she leaned into him, watched as her head rested briefly on his shoulder. Watched as he kissed her temple like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then, she saw me. Through the windshield, through the rain, through the lie. Her eyes met mine, no shock, no guilt, no panic, just boredom. She looked at me the way you look at an old photo you don't remember taking, familiar but unimportant. I waited for her to run, to explain, to do anything, but she didn't. She just blinked slowly, tilted her head slightly, and turned away. As if I were the inconvenience, as if I had trespassed. I stayed until they disappeared down the sidewalk. The rain eased, but the silence inside me only grew louder. I drove home like I didn't have a body, like I was just a pair of hands on a steering wheel and a heart trying not to disintegrate. When I walked into the apartment, her scent still lingered. Not her, just the version she left behind. I opened her closet, her old hoodie still hung there, paint-stained, sleeves fraying at the edges. She hadn't worn it in months, but she hadn't thrown it away either. Maybe that was the last mercy, or maybe she just forgot it was even there. I sat on the floor, keycard in hand, and stared at the photo still taped to the fridge. The coast, our smiles, our lie. That night, she came home late, said nothing about where she'd been. Kissed my cheek and yawned like she was tired from something as simple as errands. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were bright, skin flushed, not tired, just used. She didn't notice the keycard was gone, or maybe she did, and didn't care. I said nothing, because I already knew. He was everything I wasn't. Loud, flashy, magnetic in that way people learn, not inherit. The kind of man who walked into a room and immediately took up all the air because he believed it belonged to him. His laughter was too big, his watch too gold, his shoes too polished for someone who'd never walked through anything real. And she chose him. Not because he listened, not because he saw her, but because he looked at her, like she was a spotlight, not a soul. That night after the hotel, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, but I could wonder, and wondering was worse than knowing. So I followed him. Not in the way a jealous man stalks, in the way a broken one needs closure. I waited outside a club I'd seen tagged in her stories once, back when she still posted. She said it was too much noise, too little substance. But I figured if he was the type of man I thought he was, this was where he'd feel most at home, under neon lights and empty praise. I was right. He stepped out around midnight, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. He was laughing again, this time with another woman on his arm, not her, a different one, younger, glossier. She clung to his elbow like a handbag, more accessory than person. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear that made her blush and slap his shoulder playfully, and I just stood there, watching. Because suddenly, everything shattered in reverse. It wasn't just betrayal, it was repetition. She wasn't his, she was just one in a rotation, a fleeting distraction, a flavor he'd already swallowed and was now craving something new. And I had been the one to catch her when she cried. I was the one who cooked her dinner, who washed paint off her hands, who memorized her size and adjusted the blankets when she fell asleep on the couch. I was the one who stayed. He didn't even remember her face, I could see it. Why? In the way he spoke to the new girl, the same tone, the same smirk. It was all recycled. But she thought she was special. I had watched her change for him, her clothes, her perfume, the sudden obsession with whitening her teeth, the way she angled her face when she smiled, the way she spoke less about feelings and more about followers. She once told me she wanted to be loved in silence, through actions, not noise. But then she went chasing applause. Maybe she never wanted to be understood, maybe she wanted to be worshipped. And I had made the fatal mistake of loving her too quietly. Back in our apartment, there were still traces of her old self, her chipped coffee mug with the paint-stained handle, a dried-up paintbrush curled at the edge like a wilted flower. Her old hoodie, now pushed to the back of the closet, suffocating under silk. I sat on the edge of our shared bed that night, staring at the empty pillow beside me, the one that still smelled faintly like lavender and something I couldn't name anymore. She had texted earlier. Running late, don't wait up. I didn't reply, I didn't want her explanations, I didn't want her apologies. What haunted me was the realization that I had forgiven her, over and over, quietly, secretly, without her ever asking. I had forgiven the late nights, the fading kisses, the ghost-like glances. I had forgiven the lipstick stains that didn't match her shade, the perfume that didn't match her mood, the silences that grew louder than our arguments ever could. I forgave because I thought that's what love was. But it wasn't love, it was self-erasure. And now I saw it clearly. He didn't choose her. She auditioned for him. She turned herself into a version she thought he'd keep, but men like him don't keep, they collect. And I was the one who stayed. I was the one who knew her dreams by heart. I was the one who gave without asking for applause. But that made me the fool, because love, real love, doesn't survive in imbalance. It dies quietly in the hands of someone who mistakes attention for affection. That night, I finally took her painting off the wall. The one she made of us, two figures in a sea of blues, hands almost touching. She once told me it was unfinished on purpose, that it left space for growth. I looked at it again. It wasn't unfinished, it was abandoned. Just like me, she slept through it all. The first morning I didn't make coffee, the first morning I didn't kiss her forehead before slipping out, the first morning I chose myself. Her breathing was steady when I stood at the edge of the bed, watching her sleep like I used to when I loved her. There was a time I thought I could spend a lifetime just memorizing the curve of her shoulder, the way the morning light bent against her cheek. But now? It felt like looking at a painting in a museum you no longer connect with. Beautiful, distant, untouchable. No note, no message, just the sound of my footsteps leaving for the last time. The apartment was silent as I moved through it, almost reverent, as if even the walls knew something sacred was being unraveled. Her things were easy to pack, not because they were few, but because they no longer belonged here. The scarf still draped over the chair, the nail polish bottles on the windowsill, the stack of sketchbooks under the coffee table, once overflowing with color, now blank, abandoned, like her promises. I packed each item with care, not out of love, but finality. I didn't break things, I didn't burn them, I simply removed her from the life I once built for us. Her suitcase, her coats, her photos. All sealed in quiet cardboard coffins, all shipped to her mother's address without a single word. I imagine they arrived like a storm she never forecasted. Except for one thing, the umbrella. The same one I held over her head the day we met. The one that sheltered us from the first rain, the one she left behind in my apartment that night like it was a thread tying her to me. She used to call it fate. I kept it. Not out of sentiment, but because fate had become my witness. And I needed her to remember where it all started, and what she chose to forget. So I took a photo of the umbrella leaning against our old doorway, alone, dead, waiting, and I left it there. Taped to the photo was a note, just 7 words, scrawled in my cleanest handwriting. You forgot this the first time too. No signature, she wouldn't need one, she would know. By the time she woke, the apartment was empty, no keys in the bowl, no toothbrush beside the sink. No piano playing in the corner of the room like it used to when I wanted to fill the silence with something softer than my pain. Just her, and the echo of everything I stopped saying. The texts came within the hour. Where are you? Is this a joke? Why would you do this? Then the calls, one after the other, relentless, desperate, like bullets to my chest, sharp and fast, but too late. I didn't answer, not once. Because I'd already buried the part of me that would have cared, the part that would have rushed home at her first tear, the part that forgave her on nights she didn't even apologize. That part of me now lived in the past, curled beside rainy sidewalks and cold kisses and unsaid goodbyes, and I refused to exhume him. She tried everything. Photos, voice notes, apologies dressed as questions, even threats, eventually. But you can't threaten someone who's already lost everything. You can't scream into silence and expect it to scream back. I walked through a new apartment later that day, smaller, quieter, but mine. I hung nothing on the walls. I didn't bring her with me, not even in photos. Just the umbrella. Closed, tucked in the corner by the door. Not as a keepsake, as a gravestone. For the boy who once believed love was enough, for the man who stood in the rain thinking he could save someone who didn't want to be saved. Sometimes, goodbyes are not spoken, they're written in the space between one heartbeat and the next, in the silence that follows a final breath. She never saw mine coming, because she never thought I could leave. She thought I'd always be the one who stayed, who forgave, who waited. But I think the cruelest thing I ever did was walked away without slamming the door. Some heartbreaks don't end with tears, they end with transformation. I left the city quietly, no dramatic exit, no middle finger to the skyline, just a one-way train ticket and a bag filled with notebooks I hadn't touched in years. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from something, I was walking towards something else, something still undefined, but mine. The city I moved to was smaller, quieter, it didn't demand anything of me, it let me rebuild. I took a job shelving books at a second-hand store on the corner of a street where the trees actually changed colors in fall. It was nothing like what I'd done before, no deadlines, no clients, just dusty pages and the soft hush of paper being turned. And slowly, almost accidentally, I started writing again. At first, it was small things, a sentence on a napkin, a paragraph in the margins of an old novel, then entire pages filled with things I hadn't been able to say out loud, truths I had swallowed for years. She had taken my voice, but in losing her, I remembered I'd had one to begin with. My first piece was a short essay I submitted anonymously to a local literary zine. They published it. It was called The Girl Who Forgot How to Say Goodbye. The editor called it brutally honest. The readers called it a punch to the chest. I called it therapy. The stories came fast after that. Raw, confessional, quiet and brutal. I didn't sugarcoat the betrayal. I didn't paint myself as a victim. I just told the truth the way it lived in my chest, heavy, unfinished, bleeding through every sentence. People cried reading my words, they messaged me. They said, I thought I was alone. They said, you wrote exactly how I felt. And suddenly, my pain had a purpose. I got signed by a small publisher, then a bigger one, and before I could fully process it, I was sitting at book signings, holding a pen in hands that once trembled just dialing her number. My first full-length novel was titled Louder Than Goodbye. It climbed the charts in 3 weeks. Readers called it a masterpiece of modern heartbreak. Critics said it was intimate, intelligent, emotionally precise, but she called it familiar. The message came in just past midnight, tucked between fan mail and interview requests. Just finished the book, I saw myself in her. And I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't know how to reply, but because I knew exactly what to say. That was the point. She didn't reply after that, and I didn't need her to. She was no longer the woman who held the paintbrush. She was the canvas. Her betrayal, her silence, her curated coldness, it had all become chapters she couldn't escape. I was the author now. I decided who mattered, who stayed, who broke, and who bloomed. I didn't write her name, but the world recognized her anyway. At one of my signings, a girl approached with trembling hands. She looked at me like I was someone who'd survived a fire she was still burning in. She whispered, I left because of your book. I nodded. Because that was the real glow-up, not the bestsellers, not the money, not even the quiet revenge of being seen. It was knowing I had become the version of myself she never believed I could be. I no longer needed her apology, I no longer wanted her memory. But I kept the umbrella, still folded, still waiting by the door in my new apartment, not out of sentiment, out of symmetry, because sometimes life has a strange way of bringing you full circle, but this time, I was holding the pen. I had just signed the 100th copy that day when I saw her. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. Her presence rippled across the line like a chill cutting through warm air, the kind of silence that doesn't ask permission, just takes over the room. She stood near the back, hesitant, like she was waiting for someone to tell her she didn't belong there, pale, fragile, but her makeup was flawless, as always. A beautiful mask hiding whatever storm was brewing beneath. Our eyes met. And for a moment, the noise around me, clapping, camera clicks, people thanking me for saving them with words, melted into static. She walked toward me slowly, each step deliberate, like crossing a battlefield she used to own. But this wasn't hers anymore. I wasn't hers anymore. The people ahead of her were laughing, talking about their favorite chapters, quoting my lines like scripture. She stood in line like them, holding the book in her hands like it might burn her. When she finally stepped forward, she didn't speak, not at first, she just stared at me, not like a lover, not even like a stranger, like a ghost looking at the place it once called home. I glanced down at the book she slid across the table. It was my debut novel. The same one she'd inspired, the same one that turned my pain into profit, the same one she had mocked in her silence when it first released. She opened her mouth, the first word cracked like a window left open in the dead of winter. I missed you. Her voice was quiet, real, unpolished, not the rehearsed sweetness she wore like perfume. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. This wasn't her chapter anymore. I chose wrong, she said, her throat trembling like it didn't want to let the truth out. I thought he saw me. I thought he loved me. She paused, searching my face. There was nothing for her to find. My nights are cold, she whispered. Even when I'm not alone. That's when I finally looked up. She expected warmth. She expected maybe a flicker of something left over, but all she saw was the version of me she never thought I could become. Not bitter, not cruel, just distant. I took the pen in my hand, uncapped it with a slow, deliberate motion, and signed the inside cover of her copy. She leaned in, as if the gesture meant something, as if I might write something only she would understand, something for us. But what I wrote was the last thing she ever gave me, and the first thing I finally returned. To the girl who taught me how to bleed pretty. I closed the book and slid it back toward her. She touched the edge of it like it might bruise, her lips parted, no sound came out. I stood then, the line paused, the air shifted, I picked up my jacket, nodded at the host, and stepped off stage. I didn't even look back. Because looking back was what she did, and I had become someone who wrote forward. Outside, the city was loud. A breeze rolled in, cool and unapologetic. I stood beneath the glow of the bookstore marquee, hands in my pockets, eyes on the sky. She had once kissed me like I was the thing she'd been waiting for her entire life, but when she kissed him, she forgot how to come back. And now, her kiss didn't matter anymore, not even as memory. I had rewritten what it meant. I had taken the lips that once shook me and turned them into lines on a page. They didn't sting now, they just existed. She stepped out a few minutes later, holding the book to her chest like it was a wound. She didn't speak again, just watched me from the sidewalk like maybe, if she stood still enough, time would fold back into itself. It didn't, and I didn't. I walked away, not out of anger, but because I'd finally reached the ending she never thought I'd write. The train station hadn't changed, same cracked tiles, same metal benches that never quite warmed up, same flickering departures board that buzzed every few seconds like a tired heart refusing to stop. But this time, I wasn't waiting for someone, I wasn't running either, I was just there, standing still, at the very platform where she once cried into my shoulder like leaving me would tear her apart. She lied, or maybe she believed it at the time, it doesn't really matter now. Back then, I had held the umbrella. Back then, the sky wept harder than she did. Back then, I told her I'd wait, that we'd figure it out, that love like ours didn't end on rainy train platforms. I was wrong. Today, there was no rain, no suitcase in my hand, no umbrella in my grip, just me and the quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, the kind that wraps around you like a long overdue exhale, the kind that says, you made it, even when it broke you. I watched the trains come and go, watched strangers hug their goodbyes, watched a little boy wave at someone disappearing into the blur of movement and glass, watched the sky soften into the same cloudy blue from the day I first met her. Funny how the weather remembers, even when we try not to. I sat on the same bench where she once kissed me, like goodbye was just a temporary word. Where I told her, you'll always have a way back. And now, I knew. Some people were never meant to come back. Some goodbyes are meant to echo. I didn't come here for nostalgia. I came for closure. There were no angry words left inside me, no hunger to prove her wrong, no ache for answers. She had already said everything she needed to say, in every lie, in every flinch when I reached for her, in every silence that stretched too long between our good mornings and her late-night returns. I took a breath, slow, deep, clean, and I whispered in, to the wind, thank you for leaving. Not out of bitterness, but truth. Because if she hadn't walked away, if she hadn't kissed someone else while I still made her breakfast, if she hadn't called my love safe while chasing chaos dressed as passion, I would have never become the version of myself who stood here now, not broken, not bitter, just rebuilt. Some people leave you in pieces so you can discover how to build a stronger foundation. She was my breaking point, and my beginning. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the last note I ever wrote her. It was never meant to be sent. I wrote it months ago, in the quiet of my new apartment, when her name still rattled around the walls like a ghost refusing to leave. You taught me that love is not what we say, but what we choose when no one's watching, and you chose him, and I chose to forgive myself. I folded it once, then again, then let it drift into the wind like an offering. It danced down the platform before getting caught on the edge of the track, then gone, and with it, the last of what I owed her. I stood, closed my eyes, lifted 2 fingers to my lips, and I kissed them, soft, simple, real. The last kiss I would give, not to her, not to any memory, but to me, to the man who survived her silence, to the boy who once begged for love that came in fragments, to the version of myself who waited at train stations with shaking hands and hope bruised between his ribs. I let the wind take that kiss, let it carry it wherever it wants, because I didn't need it to land, I just needed it to leave. No more morning kisses, no more pretending, no more begging a ghost to stay. Only me, and the quiet, and peace. And sometimes, that's the most romantic ending of all.